Today on Locked On Red Wings, the Fanatics era is officially here, and it looks okay so far. And also our final thoughts on the Walman trade, the draft on Friday, and the buyout window, which opens up on Thursday.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a former broadcast producer for 97.1 The Ticket, where Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Scotty, a lot of things to talk about in this episode. So we're going to try and be as efficient about it as possible, which of course thereby means we will talk 20 minutes about each subject, and our bosses will get upset about it.
So bad at efficiency, let me tell you. If there was a efficiency rating for podcasting, like we talk about with athletes, we would be toward the bottom. We would not be. We would not grade out very well. Yeah.
So we got so much to talk about. I mentioned it in the cold open. We got the Fanatics thing, which I think is kind of the headline of the day. The Fanatics era is here. They showed previews of every single jersey in the NHL, including rebrands for both the Kings and the Ducks. And so we want to riff a little bit about that because it's going to literally affect all of us who like to buy merchandise and the players on the ice. And on top of that, we have the buyout window opening up on Thursday. This is our final episode before the first round because our Friday episode will come after the first round has concluded. So we have our final thoughts on that.
There for sure.
Yeah, and then we will clean up our final thoughts because, we've had time to digest the Walman trade a little bit more. It won't be anything real different, just maybe a little less sporadic and a little bit more concise. Again, efficiency, not our strong suit. Let's begin with the Fanatics thing, as I teased Scotty. As I stated, Fanatics introduced their line of pro-style jerseys, replacing Adidas at the helm. And I have to say, so far, what I have seen from what they have shown us, and remember, they're going to show us the best of the best, their best possible product. I have been okay with it. I still think it's a step down from what Adidas got us, but I think that's more of a praise of Adidas's editions than it is an indictment on what Fanatics has shown us. Again, I should have prefaced with this. I'm not a Fanatics fan. I've really disliked almost everything that they've given NHL fans as products since they got licensing agreements. Again, I worked at LCA. I worked firsthand with this stuff. Their products, by comparison with 47 brand, Adidas, all of that stuff, always seemed so much cheaper, but the price point was higher. I still hold true, and I know it's not a hot take. A lot of people think this way. A lot of Fanatics products, and Scotty, you saw it firsthand with MLB. You have a passionate opinion on Fanatics too, like a lot of baseball fans do. So I want to say that I'm coming in this huge skepticism about the product they're going to give us, which is why I'm emphasizing like they're showing us the best that they can possibly do for this press release, media availability type thing for these jerseys as they unveil them, and they look okay. And that's what I'll say. They got rid of the shoulders as we knew them. They reinforced the elbows. And according to the Daily Faceoff article that Frank Saravelli wrote, it's being produced with the same materials in the same factory by the same people as the Adidas jerseys. So theoretically, the quality should not dip. But Scotty, as you are very well aware with Major League Baseball, you can't really be too optimistic with Fanatics and their products.
You can't trust them. We can just call it what it is. You can't trust. I could not care less about that report and that comment. We were told the same thing about the Major League Baseball pants, and I've never seen as many ripped pairs of baseball pants in my entire life. It's happened twice to Riley Green this season. And that's only our own team. So like, and they told us, oh, the pants are the same. We only changed the jerseys. So like, I don't care. I'll believe it when I see it. As far as that goes, I have major skepticism. I don't even care about this, the like releases. All they did was show really the designs, right? Like they showed what the designs of the sweaters will look like. And I don't have an issue with them. They didn't come in and change them, and they weren't all, like gun-ho and made them dramatically and drastically different or anything like that on paper, right? And there's some, like you mentioned, subtle changes to several of the teams, I'll say, quite a handful, I guess, of the teams, but I really don't care. Like until I see the product on the ice and I see what it looks like on the ice, I could not care less. We were on the baseball side of things, we were shown jerseys too back in December, and we were like, oh, look, they all look the same. And then on the field, they looked absolutely ridiculous, and they looked like Little League jerseys. So like I could really give less of a what about like a picture with a design on it. I really don't care. Until I see it in stores and in person and on the ice, I'm not going to have too much of an opinion on it. But the designs don't look dramatically different or awful. So I guess if you consider that a win, then I guess it is. But I'm waiting till I see it on the ice.
Yeah, and that's why I was like picking my words so carefully when even trying to say that they looked okay, because they have such a bad track record with not just the officially licensed merchandise for fans, but even now the officially licensed merchandise for professionals. And I remember when we had this conversation a few years ago, it might have been last year, the year prior, when this agreement was signed.
Yeah,
we were like, yeah, we both know we don't like their what they give the fans. But I mean, these are going to be worn by the players, the top of the top. So of course they're going to step up their game, and then they didn't with Major League Baseball. So on the unveiling of the Fanatics era, while yes, on the mannequin, I'm looking at the uniform and I go, okay, this while it's not as good of Adidas, because I really liked Adidas's design, it is still, it looks a lot similar to what Reebok had before that. Really, the main difference is the embossed shoulders, right? Like, that's what they took away, really. That's gone now, and it looks like just every other professional jersey we've ever had. But I say that knowing that you've been bait and switched as a Tigers fan. We've all been bait and switched if you're a baseball fan. And that every single product you try to buy with Fanatics online or in a store generally is cheap material that falls apart very easily in the wash, or sometimes flat out has the wrong team name printed on the merchandise. So that's why I'm like picking my words really carefully, because yeah, the unveiling, it looked fine, but like to what you said, they're going to have to prove it when the actual season starts, that they can do this consistently with 32 teams and 23-man rosters. So, like, then that's where the real test is, not on some media, not some press release where they are at the absolute tip-top of their shape, which, funnily enough, people pointed out the Rangers jerseys on the mannequin, the kerning, as you will, on the Rangers diagonally. The spacing was all over the place, specifically between the A and the N, I believe. No, it was the N and the G. On the jersey, the separation was crazy, and it's like, okay, well, if this is the best of the best and you're already messing that up, no wonder people are going to be skeptical. So that's, I get it, I understand it, I'm with you.
Yeah, baseball's press release was good too.
Yeah. Real quick before we go to break, I do want to say we got the official reveal of both the Ducks and the Kings.
I love
rebrands, retro rebrands. I love both of their rebrands. Huge upgrades on what they were, but also at the same time, could have still been done better if they had gone full retro, and if the Kings had gone back to the royal purple and gold, that would have been sick. And if the Ducks had embraced the plum, the plum.
Yeah, I do think that best case scenario for the Ducks specifically was going full, kind of like bringing back the plum and going full OG Mighty Ducks, but I do really like the orange rebrand. I think it looks great. And I like the Kings too. I really like the matte black buckets. I think that's I really like
Right.
that a lot. I think that's much better than the Chrome Domes. So yeah, I'm all about it. I really like both of them, but I really like the Ducks specifically. I was very impressed with. I'm
Well,
pretty
yeah,
pumped to see that on the ice.
the one little thing, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, and this actually harkens back to our conversation a couple weeks ago about the Utah Hockey Club that may have been cut from the episode because we rambled about it for like 10 minutes, and I was like, what are we doing? But the Red Wing, or not the Red Wings, the Ducks' new uniforms being all orange, which, by the way, I love with the old logo. It's still a huge win, even if it's not plum. Well, Anaheim is in Orange County. So
Right.
if that was intentional, I'm like, that's so smart. It's so smart.
Yeah.
And then the Kings, of course, that logo is classic Gretzky era. I still just like the purple and gold better, but still a huge win, and I love the matte helmets too. That's also a win. All right, we're going to head to a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about the buyout window opening up in the NHL today. As you're listening to this, it's Thursday. So stay tuned for that on segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, comedy, concert, theater, and so much more. And you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event with flash deals. And you know what? They got a thing called zone deals as well that save you even more when you choose a section, and let Game Time choose those seats. And with those all-in prices, you can just toggle that feature, turn it on, and it will show the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are going to move on to talking about the buyout window opening up. And just essentially, and this is something that if you've listened to us at all during this offseason, something we've brought up a ton, right? But the buyout window opens up on Thursday, and I think it runs until the end of the day on Sunday, because it's the first buyout window. And I guess my question for you, Scotty, and for the people is there anyone on the roster right now with the Detroit Red Wings that if you were Steve Yzerman, you would saying it's probably best case to buy this contract out and bite that bullet?
Yeah, I mean, the one that obviously jumps out to everybody, I think, is Justin Hall. And I think that is going to be, this is not rocket science. This is not some, crazy, explanation that's going to blow anybody's mind, but it really just comes down to if he has a trade market or not. If you think there's any way that even if you retain, 50% of it or something, that you can move his contract for an asset, then you obviously are going to do that. But I think really, to me, this is just going to teach us if he has a trade market or not. Like, that's really all, because it's just again, obviously, if anybody is willing to take him on, even if you, again, retain part of it, then that's going to happen. And if you don't think that's possible and you don't think he has a trade market, then I think that there's a real chance you see him bought out. And we'll talk about the trade again here in a second, but I think, I don't know. I find it really hard to justify, because of his handedness, that means that, there's more of a chance that he's going to be on the team this year. Like, he was getting healthied all year in year one, man. Like, I can't fathom that is going to really be a huge factor in the decision to either keep him or not keep him. But we'll see. I think really, to me, this is just going to teach us what his market is.
Yeah, and so I want to preface this too. I should have said this before I asked you the question, and that's on me. But I want to make it abundantly clear that while we trivialize, I guess, buying out a contract as a quick and easy way getting out of something that just hasn't worked out, I do want to emphasize that it is the last ditch thing that a team should do, because what you do by doing that is double the length you're paying that player, even if you cut in half, or actually with players over 26, it's 2/3 of what you owe them over twice as long. And I think with Justin Hole, it's like over $1.5 million, which I still think if you can't move on from him and if you can't move on from him via trade and you don't have plans for him to be part of your team, I still think that that's the right move to make. But at the same time, I would not be surprised if it doesn't happen, because then you're married to 4 years of like $1.5 million. I think it's like $1.65 million that you'd have to owe him over the next 4 years.
Well,
because
how much
he still
is
has
that roster spot worth to you, right?
Yes.
Like, that's what it comes down to. I mean, if how much is opening up that roster spot for somebody else to slide in there and play worth whatever it is, 1.1, 1.4 mil a year?
And it's also possible that, and I hate this idea, and it's just me spitballing right now. Don't take it for anything, because I'm not an insider. I'm just a guy with a microphone, right? But it's possible that this is one of the reasons why they moved Walman rather than Justin Hole, was because buying out locks you into 4 years, where if you get rid of Jake Walman, the guy you were able to move, if Justin Hole did not have a trade market, now you don't have to worry about buying him out and being on the hook for 4 years. But like you said, Scotty, okay, now you're on the hook for that roster spot for 2 more years. And I still can't imagine if you go into the season with Justin Hole still on the roster, you would imagine he would have to have an increased role, because if you're Justin Hole, how are you not?
Is a whole issue in itself. Like ridiculous. We've talked at nauseum about this blue line and how much room for improvement there is on the blue line, right? Like, you have Sider, you're hoping that you have Edvinson, and after that, there's a lot of room for improvement. If you go into opening night, and I don't care if he's playing 8 minutes a night on the third pair, if you go into opening night with Justin Hall having a starting, one of the 6 defensemen that are dressing on opening night, I'm going to find it really hard to believe that your blue line got better from last year to this year, given how much was left to be desired, and the fact that he was the scratch on the blue line group that we talked about had a lot of room to grow. That I don't know, unless they bring in some huge name at the top, which is still very possible. We'll see what happens next week. I find it really hard to believe that this blue line would have taken a big step in the right direction if he's getting an increased role.
Yeah, and I guess I'll say it like this: I don't want to buy out Justin Hole. And that's not because I think that he is going to rebound and have a great season.
One wants to buy out anybody.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, buyouts.
But it's the last ditch scenario the Red Wings should have to do. Right. But if they do buy him out, then that means that that was the only way to free yourself. But then again, as the trade for Jake Walman earlier in this week proved, we as fans clearly don't understand. There's clearly a gap between what fans and what front offices view the value of a specific player is. We as Red Wings fans had high opinions of Jake Walman. I know some people, looked at his season and thought he had a down year, which he did. He did analytically have a down year. That's without a doubt. And I don't want to make this a Walman conversation. That's for segment 3. But we still believe that was mostly because of the way they deployed him. So maybe the organization is still higher on Hole than we thought. Hard to believe after you scratch him for all but 38 games. But, I don't want to have to buy out Justin Hole if you don't have to. But on the same note, I can't see how you go into next season, as you put it, Scotty, with him on the roster and your defensive core being better because of it.
Yeah, I mean, that was my point. So agree.
Yeah, nice. And
really
to note
quickly,
too,
they just got just across the news desk here, something really small, but NHL coaches will now be able to challenge delay of game penalties starting in the 2024-25 season. So
stellar. That's good.
New rule change. There you go.
That's absolutely good. I'm
Yes.
all for that.
No issue with that.
And then the last thing I want to add about the buyouts is you still have 2 contracts on the book with buyouts. Applicator, you're owing $1 million for 2 more years.
That's
and
just
then
insane.
Kyler Yamamoto, that's a Ken Holland special.
That's
that was his
so
guy.
insane.
That was his boy.
Still paying him. Wow.
And Kyler Yamamoto, this is the last year you're going to owe him $500,000. So you're going to be free of $500,000 if you don't buy out Justin Hull. You're going to have $500,000 more on the cap this next offseason, and then another $1 million to work with this offseason after that. So,
right, which is why again, this is why buyouts suck, and like no one wants to do it. Like no,
well, it's exactly.
No one wants to buy players out. That counts against your money you're spending. Yeah. You don't want to do that to somebody that's not on the team.
And that's exactly like Justin Applicator is the perfect example of why you don't want to have to buy out. Like it was a bullet that Yzerman had to bite. It's actually a really good comp. It was a bullet that Yzerman had to bite and had to do to clear cap and get a roster spot back from a player that just wasn't effective on the cap hit anymore. I think Applicator he didn't go anywhere else. He retired. Like that's how bad that contract was on the books to the Red Wings. And you're still paying him. I understand the contract term was a little bit different. Actually, it might have been similar. I think it might have been about 2 years left. I can't remember how many years ago that contract got bought out. But that's why you don't want to have to buy out Justin Hull if you don't have to, but it could be a reality. And he's really the only one I have in my mind. Like other people that come to mind, like Oli Mata, you got 1 year left at $3 million. Jeff Petrie, you got one more year at $2.3 million. You're only paying him $2.3 million. You have him on a third pair role. I think he's effective enough. Like there's not anyone. I don't want to buy out anyone that's more than 1 or 2 years left on their deal because I don't want to pay them for more than twice that. That's just how it is. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. We're going to do a quick break. When we return, we're going to real quick give you our last final draft thoughts. And what we mean by that is our final draft targets we want the Red Wings to go after is. So stay tuned for that on Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, we're going to talk about our final draft thoughts here heading into Friday. Because again, as a news and note for our listeners, we will not have an episode up at Friday on midnight. We're going to wait to make a Friday episode until after the first round has concluded. That way you guys get a first round reaction immediately and don't have to wait all weekend. So Scotty, with that being said, who is on your short list for targets after all the draft profiles we did? Who is on your short list of targets that you'd like to see the Red Wings get at number 15?
I'm going to be like this is not good radio. It's the most anticlimactic, like not clickbait thing ever. But I think the one that would surprise me the least, or that I'm kind of expecting to be on the Red Wings radar and that I would be pleased with as well, is still just MBN. Like I don't know. Like he was the guy we took in our mock, obviously, for Locked On. He's a guy that a lot of people have mocked to the Detroit Red Wings as well. And I think he fits kind of somewhat of a positional need organizationally, but also I think he kind of fits the profile that this front office looks to acquire a lot in drafts. And yeah, I mean, we can talk about a few other names, obviously, as well. But I mean, if I was asked to give one name of like who's the person I kind of have highlighted as my guess, it would be him.
Yeah, I mean, he's on my short list too. Obviously, we've talked a lot about him, and everyone we've talked to about him sings the praises and talks about the fit here with Detroit. I have a few other guys as well that, like, because obviously there's a possibility he goes after, or the Red Wings don't pick him if he's on the board.
Sure.
I really like Michael Hayes, who I think we talked about with Scouch the first time we had Will on. And Hayes is a real talented two-way center, playmaker, dangler, all the good stuff that you like to hear out of a center. I know that Bob McKenzie's final list, and like usually when we're talking about insiders having mock drafts, or I guess that's not a mock draft, but a draft ranking, prospect ranking, he's kind of the guy to go to. Bob McKenzie has him listed at 24th, which I think is mostly in line with like a lot of people said, but I don't think it would be an incredible reach to go for Michael Hayes at 15 if you want to draft a two-way center. He's 6'1" already at age 18, so like he's just going to get stronger. I really, and he's a right-hand shot, which, I mean, I know that's not a reason you take a guy, but it's a nice added benefit. So I like Michael Hayes a lot for those abilities. Consta Helenius, who I believed what we talked with Prashanth. I know that a lot of people have him. He's a riser in this in the draft. It seems like people had him going in the teens, but now he's going. A lot of projections have him anywhere between like 8 and 11. So he might not make it to the Red Wings, but if he's there, absolutely take him. Whether he's a center or a right wing, he's just a really smart hockey player with the ability, just like Hayes, to be a playmaker. So I like that a lot. And then go ahead. Sorry.
No, I agree. I think one of the players that is, and again, part of this is just like Red Wings fan hype, 2 months ago when we first hit the offseason and whatnot. But just based on the conversations we've had with people and based on the conversations we've had on air here, just you and I am fascinated with where Yzerman ends up. Cole Yzerman, obviously not Steve. I'm really fascinated with where he goes, just because the consensus just seems to be unbelievably high upside, questionable, or like borderline just like low floor, right? And kind of is that boomer bust type of talent. And I would imagine that he's gone before the Wings pick. I know that you and I share that sentiment and have talked about that a lot over the last few weeks, but I am really fascinated with just where he ends up, whether it's on the table for the Wings or not. He's a guy that I could see going anywhere. I could see him going like 7 or 8 overall, and I could see him going 20, and neither would be like super surprising to me just based on all the conversations we've had with people. And I think he's a really interesting one for the Wings too. I know who did we talk about him with? Boltman?
That might have I think that was also Prashanth. I think we talked about Prashanth too. We did ask about him.
Oh no,
with
you're
Max.
right. You're right. It was definitely Prashanth. Yeah. And I know when we talked about it with him too, the conversation was, well, and this is what Prashanth said was, the Wings are missing a player like this in their system, but there are so many questions still about, the consistency of his ability and the floor and whatnot, that it does still make it a question mark. I don't know. I'm of all the players in the entire draft, I might be the most just, storyline to watch. I think he would probably be at my top spot for that.
Yeah, I mean, he and Beckett Seneca are two guys that I didn't have on my short list, and the only reason I didn't have them on my short list is just because I don't think they fall to Detroit. I know that's a little contradictory because I just named Consta Helenius, but everyone we've talked to thinks that he could be in that range. And Cole Yzerman is somebody who's been dropping while Consta Helenius has been rising. A lot of experts now don't think that Cole Yzerman is a top 10 caliber pick, but everyone still has him going before the Red Wings pick at 15. And Beckett Seneca, that's a guy we talked about with Max Boltman. I think it was the very first draft profile we did. I like Beckett Seneca a lot. I like what he brings to the game. I just don't see him being there at 15. And if he is, I would love to have him. But that's why they're not on my short list. I agree with you. That's just the reasoning I had in my head, even if it's a little bit contradictory. But I'm full of contradictions. The final guy on my short list I had is Liam Greentree. And he's a guy that Bob McKenzie in his final rankings actually ranked a little bit higher than some others. Had him at 18, so right in the wheelhouse for the Detroit Red Wings. Tony Ferrari had him at 16 himself. So this is a guy who, again, another smart player, another playmaker. He's big, 6'2", so he kind of fits an Yzerman profile from that regard. Power forward is the words that they're using on Elite Prospects to describe his game. I'm drawing a blank on who we spoke with about Liam Greentree, but this is just a player that, again, just fills might be a best player available, but fills a need for the Red Wings in forward depth in the system. So I like that as an option too, but I definitely agree with you, Scotty, that MBN would be my number one choice should he be available of guys on my short list.
Yeah, no, and that maybe it's just a case of, like, don't overthink it. Like, he's really good all around. He's got size, feels a positional or an organizational need to an extent. Like, I think if he's on the board there, and again, all of this matters on how the board falls, right? If surprises happen, then that'll throw a little bit of a wrench in it. But if you're playing a safe bet here, I think he's probably the guy to circle.
Absolutely. And with that, Scotty, do you want to do just a quick touch upon the Walman trade? We already discussed it for 20 minutes yesterday, so there's not much more we have to say, but just we've had time to digest it, kind of just touch on it very briefly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. My mindset hasn't really changed from the sense of, again, just asset management, which is something I feel like we said about 1 billion times on yesterday's show. So I'll try to not say it 1 billion more times. That and in a vacuum, I think, were the two phrases we said about 16 times each. So I'll try to refrain. But I think that's kind of still where my head is at. I know a lot of times we have immediate reactions and then our opinions change as times goes on. Maybe a week from now, it will. Maybe in free agency, it will. But as it stands, a day later, I'm kind of in almost the exact same headspace. I think that it's still a very questionable at best and poor at worst use of assets. But I do think that there's still, obviously, you did it to clear cap. There's room to improve the team now. So kind of a little bit of give and take, but I find it hard to give an overall grade until we see what's done with the roster spot and the cap space that was created.
Right, and I think that's the most important thing to say here is once we see the rest of what Steve's got cooking, assuming he has something cooking, it's a little hard to really give this a grade, but you're 100% correct in what we were both saying yesterday, that regardless of that, it's still poor roster management. It can be made to look better, a lot better, based on whatever names you acquire because of this cap space. But regardless, it's still poor asset management to have to attach a second for Jake Walman and get nothing in return unless future considerations becomes an actual physical, tangible thing, which it can sometimes. Most of the time, it's nothing. Future considerations literally means here's this thing. But unless future considerations literally become something tangible, then it will just remain poor asset management, even if you make an accompanying move to bring in a Draisaitl or Mitch Marner, which is a pipe dream, right? I'm just talking in the highest of best outcomes. So that's just where we're at it. We're going to be, an accompanying move can make us a lot happier, but we're still not going to be happy about giving up an asset for nothing and then having to attach a pick on top of it. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts regarding the whole thing?
I don't think so. I think that's pretty much all I got. We ball.
All right. We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode Friday night after the first round. So stay tuned to that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.